Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roach Crossing weekly general live stream, January 6th, 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. Yep, it wasn't New Year last week. Um, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope everybody had a nice New Year, New Year's Eve. I had a very chill New Year's actually compared to past years, but it was very good. Had a couple of drinks and had that enjoyment with Brandon Thomas, who is a naturalist friend, naturalist bug frog, etc. friend, and Victor as well was here obviously. Uh, Oh man, I know I want to say it's been the last 4 weeks. I've just sort of been I come on here and I say, "Oh, it's been a busy week." And yeah, it's just it's just always, do I like vodka? Alex Baranowski asked, "Do you like vodka cranberry?" I drink when I do drink. Very rare non bug related discussion here topic. When I do drink, I like to either savor the journey, so I go with some things that are conventionally shunned by professional hardcore drinkers. So I like hard seltzers and ciders and stuff, so I can enjoy my trip. Or I just want to get straight to the point, so I have something hard like vodka or what else do I really like? Rum. This is just what's the thing that Brandon got that I like too? We keep calling it peach. I thought he called it peach crom at first, so that's what we start calling it. Hi Hazy, hello some eggs. You're joining for an unconventional discussion. I do like Moscato too, but I don't know if they actually add sugar or something to it or not, but I don't know. It'll put me to sleep, but not in the same way as like some other stuff that's like sugar free or whatever. So I'm not really sure if they add any extra sweeteners to it or if it's got naturally high fructose or something in it. But yeah, I like Moscato here and there. So yeah, busy week. Starting off 2022, very strong. I Did it happen last week or no? There was a there was some YouTubers did a video on pseudoscorpions, and they put a link in their description to the website, and um about, I don't know, maybe 12ish hours afterwards, there was this gigantic spike in site traffic, which I'm not going to complain about, obviously, but it was just with that spike, and then it's just sort of gone downwards back to more normal levels. But with that, I had a bunch of orders, and so it's just been planning those around the weather and my desired schedule of wanting to do things. It's been a bit, and so I'm trying to multi-manage a couple of things. I've spent the last 2 months getting a lot of new stuff to sort of get projects floating for the future, and so managing that, and also I don't know if maybe Angela's here. There's a local pet store called it's a pet store, and how else do you describe? It's like a 60s through 80s, not trinkets, just like a not even a general store. It's like a, what's the word for that sort of thing? It's like a punk alternative type stuff. But they also have a reptiles and invertebrates, etc. section that I believe Angela manages, and it's actually, as far as like pet stores, supplies, etc. places go. is very, very good quality. They take very good care of all the animals and whatnot, and always have a good selection of things and supplies and whatnot. So it's a very cool place. And again, it's really weird that it's a sort of combination of two things that you might think are pretty difficult or different. It's the tiredness talking there. Anyways, I managed to put in some orders for some big boy supplies. Also, hi to everybody who just popped up. Braden, Tennyson, and hello, Josh. Joshua, real quick, if you're listening right now, I'm going to send you an email about something that looks like you sent me an email. I'm gonna read your email and respond to it in a little bit, maybe even after the stream. But I have to get this question off my head while it's still up there. So I'm just gonna send that there. Anyway, so I did a big boy order for like some big boy supplies in the form of a bunch of critter keepers. And, I call these critter keepers, but the actual name of the catalogs is faunariums for these darker lidded ones. And so that was my bad miscommunicating, because when I told her critter keepers, she thought, oh, I'm going to order the item that's called the critter keeper. And so she ordered a bunch of like a 50 count of these, but they're the critter keepers. So they're slightly different plastic. The lids are slightly different and they're multiple different colors. So that would totally screw with my OCD. But then my brain kind of reorganized things and thought, the color lids brings a little bit of color to the bug room. And also I can use, this will also be helpful for me in another way, because I can use these dark lidded ones for roaches, and then I can use the multicolored ones for isopods. So in the end it worked out. But anyways, so I've been in the middle of overhauling all my isopod bins, because I really want to get maintenance on those down to as low as possible, so I can basically set up projects and then do this extreme scrutiny over the course of several weeks where I go insane and pick, the projects and pick pairings and then do all that stuff. So I don't end up going another, what I say, it was July to December or something without doing maintenance in bins. And then, colonies shrink to anywhere to 100% smaller to, 20% smaller, whatever. Some eggs, there was an aquarium shop near me that only stayed open for about 2 years. Some reptiles and invertebrates. I should have bought more crickets from them. Yeah, brick and mortar stores, it's either, this is my perception, it seems like it's either feast or famine, where they get into a good, niche where they have stuff and regular clientele and everybody knows about them, and they sort of do a bunch of different things, or they have a bunch of different animals, and they're really worked into the community that they're set up in. Or I don't want to call it a racket. It's not really a racket, but where they just sort of pop up and they don't really perform what they're supposed to do well, and they just sort of disappear. And it's always a very narrow margin between them staying in business and whatnot and succeeding. And it's kind of very hit or miss, as I understand it, from watching pet stores around here that aren't like big chain stores. It's easier for stuff like aquarium stores, though, because they heat the whole damn building, and they can feed 90% of the stuff that they have very cheap fish flakes. So it's very easy for them to, there'll be a lot of them. Diversity depends on basically what suppliers and stuff they know for getting different species. So anyways, that's what I've been doing, has been outfitting these critter keepers to accommodate a lower maintenance style setup. I've made one roach bin in the new style. I brought this up last week, where I'm going to have to go through all of those and redo them in this new style for watering. But I'll show one off now. And I think I brought up before that with the gasket, or with this little watering port thing that I'm doing, I didn't put that there. I have to redo them by taking out all the roaches and whatnot. I can't just modify the containers with the roaches in them. I have to actually work with a blank container. So this is one that I just made yesterday. For the isopod ones, I put the watering gasket hole or the watering port higher up because I have to fill up the substrate all the way up to here. I won't let it get within like an inch and a half of the actual very top of this so the isopods can't get onto it and whatnot. It's all just precautionary methods. Yes, Alex, I did shave my head. I just like whenever the hair gets too long, I just completely shave it all off. And that's just my easy way of dealing with it. So very quick and easy. It takes like 20 minutes and I don't have to go to the barber or anything like that. So anyways, so the ports on these Roach ones I put lower because I have to, one size fits all with my planning strategy, so I can interchange all the containers if I need to, if I take stuff out of them and clean them out. So the port for watering is right here. It's a little bit lower because if I put it up here, then I have to put the barrier over it, and it wouldn't be as effective because you'd have a hole where they could, potentially climb up onto here and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this keeps it nice, and this keeps it nice and more consistent. So this is the brass microscreen port. That's another thing. Everything's brass microscreen to stop stuff from getting out, basically. So everybody who has dwarf whites and porcelainites running around, running amok in all the different bins, I don't have that problem. I haven't had that problem. I will continue not to have that problem by using the brass microscreen here. And brass is nice because instead of rusting, it tarnishes, which is a restrictive process, so it doesn't decline in quality over time. So that's what I've been doing, is making those. So I've got about 50. I think I ordered 50 the first time. I'm gonna order another 50, or I have already placed an order for another 50. And then it's probably going to be, I think I wanted to cover. I had a whole wall covered downstairs with the old style containers, and it's a lot. And I think I want to get to that again by September with the new style, which is, of course, they take up space in a different way. So I might end up with 300 of those little smaller isopod cultures. I like it that way because it's not occupying too much room. If I have too many of something, I can do sale groups or swap or something like that. It's not taking up an enormous amount of space. I'm not a isopod mass producer by any means, and I've also found that with maybe 90% of isopods, you can have a gigantic colony in that small of a space, So, hi, Satchel. The retainer I own has been infiltrated by Pycnoscalus. Also, hey, Kyle, what's up? Hi, Satchel. Yeah, I'm just going over how I'm going crazy doing all my redoing a bunch of critter keepers for all the isopods and all the frost cloth lids that's going on. Every single one of them. That's what we'll spend a lot of time on today, was cutting all the frost cloth lids, which stops things from getting out through the top, which is usually not too big of a problem. Although when the containers get dirty or you get some mold growth up the side, it kind of the hyphae kind of scale the side and things can crawl up that after it dries up. And I'm, as everybody knows, I'm very paranoid about mixing lines, contaminating things. That's been the main. That's been the attitude and the situation over the last couple of years with isopods. It's people getting all their cultures mixed up and things getting in other places. And trichorhina are kind of like the STD of isopod breeders. So yeah, that's what I've been up to trying to think what else. Will and I just reoriented a shelf for beetle propagation, so probably going to end up with 1 or 2 racks of that. How are the Stenocris puertoricensis going or doing? Braden asks. That's an excellent question, and to be honest, I have not checked on them since I set them up. I put them in a larger critter keeper. Maybe I should start calling them faunariums so I don't have that problem again. Victor is just staring at me, even though he's got everything he could possibly want over there. They are, I think Alan and Kai brought back somewhere between 5 and 8 of them. I put them in the larger critter keeper, and I have been doing this approach with small arachnids and whatnot, where it's just a bombardment of everything they could possibly want to eat. It's like 3 different types of springtails and flightless fruit flies and dwarf purple isopods and whatever else I suspect they might want to eat. And then I just sort of like, poor baby. And then I just sort of he's so hilarious sometimes. Yeah, Alan. So it was 8 that I would have put in there, and I just bombard the container with fruit flies, and that sort of perpetuates this whole process of like, well, the fruit flies, and I also feed the fruit flies. So there's a slice of apple in there or something. So the fruit flies are able to live their best life on the apple slice, and they reproduce, and so there's some fruit fly larvae for things to eat, and then flies are crawling around and dying in there, and then their frass is feeding the springtails, and just all of this, very bioactive process. And so I found that has been extremely effective at breeding Venonies and what's the Sinutoides, I think, Sinutoides cubensis or Quadrivalvis, one of the other cosmetids that Alan and Kai collected. And so that's what I did with the Stenocris, is I threw them in there. But also because I'm not well versed enough with how long everything takes for them. I just haven't bothered to go through and peel all the leaves away and try and see who's big or if there's more babies. I just figure that I'll probably give it like maybe like 2 more months, or maybe even a month or 2, and then I'll go through and look around, and by then I think there'll be some results as to whether or not they're reproducing or that they fit. I would think that there's got to be some babies in there by at least a month. But I want to see if this method works too, because some of these cultures, just set them up and then put them up for sale, and then I can open them up when I need to. And if things don't like being disturbed, that's better for them, obviously. Something like the Venonies, where a bunch of them will just accumulate under one of the pieces of wood that I put in there, and the rest of the substrate will be full of the immatures. That's very easy to check on those. And, oh, look, here's another 10 adults that just popped up, so that's very easy to check. But with this, the way the enclosure is, it's very disruptive to have to pull all the leaves apart. And also there's the fact that right now all the fruit flies are reproducing, and so like the F1 of fruit flies has emerged in there, and so the opening the container, have fruit flies get everywhere, which isn't a huge issue, but it's annoying and also they're leaving the container. And when they reproduce in situ, they tend to be a bit smaller than when you mass produce them in a culture setting. So that's actually better in this case, because they're very meaty and very dumb, and therefore very easy for things to eat. So sometimes the size can be a factor in that. So it's nice to have them a little on the smaller side. So they're just little plump meals walking around. So yeah, there's that with all the isopods. There's a blog post going up in a couple days. I write some of the blogs ahead of time because it's easier to sit down and do several at once. Which is why I usually say something like a few days ago or a week ago or something in the blog post. But Will and I were making, I'm trying again with the communal Goliaths. I'm fairly convinced that whoever was saying you can't keep them communally was full of it, because I received another group of them. I have them together in what I would consider very poor conditions compared to last time, and they've been together like that for a couple weeks now. And I went through and sorted through them, and all the ones I put in are fine. They're all in there, and they're all growing and whatnot. I think it's the quality of the substrate that has a big effect on whether or not they're going to munch on each other, and that can be said with any cetanine larvae. So, yeah, they're doing all very well. When I looked into the bottom of the container, I could see that they're very specifically spatially arranged. So none of them are touching or in the same general vicinity. They're all, none of them are touching basically, or within like a quarter inch of each other. They're all relatively equally spatially distributed when you look at them. So they probably don't like being up against each other. They probably bite at each other defensively if they're crammed into a small space together. When they have plenty of space to move around and plenty of food, they don't seem to cause any damage to each other. So anyways, where I'm going with this is I had to rehydrate a bunch of clay and sand because it's recommended that you let them pupate in clay, and I already wrote on how I had some pupating in their frass, and whatnot. I've had good success with some cotinus pupating in a sandy clay mixture. And so instead of going pure clay, which it seems horrible for them to pupate in pure clay because it just compacts in this sort of concrete type stuff, and they have to force their way into it. And it's not very easy for them to sort of shape that chamber. It's a lot of energy expenditure. So I'm doing about maybe 50-50 glacial sand from my yard mixed with clay. So to mix that all up, and then I had to rehydrate it. And then, of course, since it's clay, you have to actually get the best results manually mixing it after that. So just sit there and run my hand through this soupy, chunky clay mess, and it just looked like raw sewage. It's this gross thing. So we got a picture of me sitting there looking very uncomfortable, wringing through the clay and sand mixture. So the next step there is once I get all the excess water out of that, because it didn't absorb all the water. Of course, I put 5 gallons of a 5-gallon bucket of water in, and the mixture did not absorb all that. So now I have to get the water out, and it'll evaporate over time. The basement's pretty dry right now, so that'll happen kind of fast, but I want to get more of it out of there because I want to get the beetle larvae in there as soon as possible. So now I have to take towels and dunk them in the clay, disgusting clayey water, and then take them out and either wring them out or just run them through the washing machine, put another one in, just keep doing this until it gets down to a reasonable humidity level. And then I'm going to do compost and leaf litter on top of that, and that'll be that. And we'll see how this communal pupation Goliath setup goes. And, I'm not concerned about getting gigantic individuals. If I just get the majority of them to pupate and enclose in this setup, I will consider that a huge success. So last time I was saying that I would consider it a success if I could keep them communally. We did that. The problem was with the pupation. So now trying to get past that and see if we can just do a setup like I do with all the other seedlings where they just pupate in situ, and it's a good time for everybody. Because after they close, it's stupidly easy to get larvae from them. You just have to have males and females together, feed them, and just any sort of material in the lay eggs in it. So that's the next step is that. So I've made a beetle rack for that now, first designated beetle rack. I'll probably be moving the darklings to it in the near future. I'm not 100% sure. I think before I move out, I'll probably end up with two designated beetle racks, and that will be where all the darklings and seedlings and dynastines and everything else goes. So that was a thing, and getting the big plastic container, moving that was definitely a 2-person job. And let's see what else. Any other good news? I received today some miscellaneous things from Mr. Ty Randall, who is wonderful for getting some new oddball species of roaches and whatnot from here and there. And so I just maybe a couple days ago we just started texting back and forth a little bit as we usually do, and I brought up a couple things that I needed. And the next thing I know, I think just suddenly a tracking number popped up. And I was like, oh, okay. It's very instant gratification. You'd be like, I want this, this, and this. And then to not even really cement the full detail of the trade and just have something on the way, I was like, okay, this is pretty neat. So Ty was very nice in that respect. And so the box popped up today as UPS. It's a bit cold, but it's very cold outside right now. And so completely reasonable. And so I had sort of an experience or moment like when I was first into roaches, because I've had a lot of things that have been cultured, and there's to an extent a finite number of things that are in the United States right now. At least not indigenous stuff that you can go out and collect. So getting something that's completely new or whatnot. Actually, and I have another thing to add to this because I have very good news, which we discovered in the last stream. And so I had the species that Ty had sent me was one that I knew was floating around a little bit. I was just sort of waiting my chance for babies to pop up. It's Pseudoglomerus tarsalis. And TJ, if you're here, it's Pseudoglomerus, right? You can correct me because I wrote Paraspherus in the thing because I'm not used to writing Pseudoglomerus. So I wrote the P and the brain autofilled the rest of it, but I'm pretty sure it's Pseudoglomerus. So it was Pseudoglomerus tarsalis, which is sort of like a fake. It's got the pseudo name. It's sort of a fake roly-poly roach in the sense that I don't think the adults can actually roll up because they're Pseudoglomerus and not Paraspherus. So Pseudoglomerus cannot fully roll up. Paraspherus can. It's got the sphere in it versus the pseudo. So I received these, and I just sort of took a moment as I unpacked them, and it was like a roach I've never seen in person before. And I just sort of had these flashbacks to I won't call them the good old days, but a different time when I received a box of maybe 40 mixed lobster roaches from somebody on the King State chat classifieds or whatever, and just getting them. And they were mostly tiny and small nibs, and there was maybe one adult male. And I just remember sort of opening it up and seeing them for the first time, just being like, wow, a bug I've never seen before. And then, so it's a bit more difficult to get that with some roaches nowadays. So I give a great advice to my springtails in solidarity with all the people feeding their bugs during the stream. So yeah, I had that nice experience opening up the Pseudoglomerus and just sort of being like, the infinite potential. Here's 12 Pseudoglomerus that could potentially create a massive, vast colony one day, and it's something I haven't seen before. I got dubia roaches. I was scared of. Some egg says, when I first got dubia roaches, I was scared by them and couldn't sleep for a while. That's interesting. So yeah, so I set those up and kind of in a power growth setup because I would really like to get those established very quickly. So over the last 12 months, my collection of Paraspherinae. Yeah, it's Paraspherinae. Has gone from none to 4. So we now have Bantua robusta, Pseudoglomerus tarsalis, Paraspherus pygmaeus, and Pseudoglomerus magnifica. And of them, the Paraspherus pygmaeus have been reproducing still relatively sparingly, but it's when I lived with my parents, this was the time of year I usually got a lot of reproduction because it was warmer and drier, and they tend to like that as long as they have some access to some moisture. So the Paraspherus are starting to get going again, which I'm very happy about. The Pseudoglomerus magnifica just dropped babies. I think I mentioned that last week, and so I was also very happy about that. And Bantua have been reproducing for the last 10 months, so I can still be happy about that, but not as crazy happy. Hello, Joey. Oh, I can't pronounce that last name. I too will rest my springtails. Why not? Somebody says, I think I actually have a slight subconscious aversion to bugs, but I've always been too fascinated by them to actually be scared of them. Yeah, it's one of those things that kind of toes the line between whether you think it's an instinctual fear or a learned instinctual reaction or or a learned reaction. Because for the longest time, I was very not skittish around spiders, but just sort of like hyper conscious around them. At least when I was like out collecting with other people in exotic places, like going to Florida and seeing all the widows everywhere, and then seeing Chuck Ford, who used to work at the spider lab at U of M Dearborn. I don't know what Chuck's up to nowadays. He can be kind of a cryptic character, but he was. I know he's quite the globetrotter too. He constantly travels. But anyways, just seeing him very casually collect just about any spider that we encountered, including the widows, almost apathetically. It kind of made me think like, huh, maybe there's a bit of like blown up fear here with a lot of the stuff. The only time that I think I saw him ever react negatively to a spider was a huntsman on like a picnic building thing in Florida. We were trying to knock it off of the rafters or whatever. It was the biggest huntsman I've ever seen. It was a Heteropoda venatorium, but it was a huge female. And I know people, and I hate this when people are like, "Oh, I saw this bug and it was like this big." And it's like, but like this, the leg span of this female compared to like my arm was probably like from here to here. This thing was gigantic. It was just sitting way up there, and so we threw like a palm frond or something to try and knock it down, and it just sort of like moved in a weird way, and Chuck just sort of like braced himself or something for that. He said it's the only time that he's ever had that reaction to like a spider, other than I think it was somewhere in Southeast Asia where he was like literally sticking his head in some sort of tree hollow, and I can't remember what sort of spider it was, but something did a defensive like rear up, and that kind of spooked him. But it's like, yeah, it's in your face, like it's right next to your eyes, you know. So, and now you are pestering me for Satanis. Yes, that's right, Alan. I went from being not spooked, just slightly hyper conscious around spiders to wanting temperate wandering spiders. I was extremely afraid of cockroaches as a child, says Satchel. I bought B. Giganteosaur to overcome my fear, and the rest was history. Yeah. Oh, do I have any examples like that with a specific thing going from being very like to being like, oh, it's so cute? I would say centipedes, but I still have a very healthy respect for them, although I do very much so like them. Wind scorpions creep me out the most for some reason. Yeah, they'll tear your hand up too if you pick them up, but it's like there's no venom there, so it's like it's the acute pain that is the potential problem. The thing with the venomous stuff is the chances for something, long term or something debilitating. I've never seen roaches in person before I got dubious, except for histories at the zoo. Yeah, actually, I think the first time I ever saw roaches in person was the hissing cockroaches at the fateful Tech Day, Science and Engineering Day thing that I went to, which was, of course, what got me into roaches in the first place. Was the 10-gallon tank with a bunch of, it may have been pure at the time, Gronfodorina portentosa, and I was just sort of like, wow. It was like, these are awesome, and I can like go somewhere and like get some, and it just sort of like it kicked off all of this stuff. That was in 2015. 2015? Yeah, it must have been, I think. I remember the fall of my freshman year of high school. Now you see, you don't like Satchel, you don't like Paraplaneta, but I actually really like them because even though they're like the default roach, kind of compared to a lot of other roaches, they're kind of like they have a slightly different body. Like they're lankier. I find that very appealing. They're almost more mantidy than a lot of other roaches are with their proportions, because they hold themselves well off the ground and they're very lanky. I don't really like tent caterpillars. Yeah, I don't know what it is about seeing like the branches covered in their little silky web thingies, but it's not really. It just kind of makes you think like, what's in here? Even if you can see the caterpillars, you also don't think that like, oh, like this handful of caterpillars made this gigantic web here. So let's see anything else to talk about. I'm sure there's something I can't remember. Still have to do the roach dump on the site. I may actually even touch on that a little now, or spoil some things that I'm going to add. Our rubrica. Brandon, I'm going to assume that you're trying to remind me of the Rhabdoblata rustica, which is, yes, thank you for reminding me, because that is what I was going to bring up. So last week on the stream, I bemoaned the loss of Rhabdoblata rustica in culture, because everybody that I knew of, everybody that TJ knew of, everybody that everybody knew of had lost their colonies. Because, and this is something that's kind of a recurring theme with the roaches that I list on my site as like advanced or expert, etc., is even if they're very easy to breed and you go through a period of time where you have tons and tons of them and you just sort of think like, wow, these are so easy. If you screw something up, or there's a lapse of care, or whatever that little thing is that's keeping them sustained and going, they will crash and there is nothing that you can do about it after that. So that's why I list rustica, I think, on the site as advanced, is because the colony will do extremely well, and you will think, wow, this is one of the easiest roaches. And you're not wrong. But then the second they get overcrowded, or they eat all their food, or there's a change in the ventilation or something like that, they will just crash through the floor. And you will go from having hundreds to having 10 that are on the verge of death, and you can't do anything about it. So this is what happened with everybody, is, everybody has some period of time where they will neglect the colony for whatever. You go on vacation, or you get busy, or blah, blah, blah. And so everybody lost theirs. And I was down to 3 females. And actually, I'll touch on this in a second. So anyways, TJ had tracked down somebody, or was able to, while we were talking about this, he must have gotten the idea and said to like, oh, let me see if anybody else has them for sale. And so he went on Facebook, and lo and behold, there was somebody who did still have them and had them available. Somebody who had picked them up from, and I asked him about this, from Brandon Maines, and a while ago, and had a good colony going. And so all the roach people rushed him, and it's probably the best sales for that species that guy has ever had, and bought up as much as we could. So I got a 40 count of them. And so now we have them. They're back in the popular zeitgeist. And so as I was adding them to my colony, I noticed that I had lost 2 out of 3 females, which is what spurred me to talk about them last week. The last female was still going, and she looked pretty plump. And so if in a couple weeks I see some newborns pop up, because all the ones that I was sent were second instar onward, maybe I didn't screw up so bad as to completely lose them. Maybe that female would have restarted all of them, at least here. But now, it doesn't really matter, because now everybody fortunately has gotten them back. Laura O'Mara says, I sometimes notice my large Madagascar roaches are missing a couple of their feet. Are they eating them off of each other? So sometimes they will bite each other's antennae off. Sometimes they just fall off as they get older. Usually with the feet, it's an age-related thing. It can be due to too high humidity as well, but usually you'll have other things happening in that case. Like you'll start seeing just die-offs in the colony too, if the moisture is way too high. But usually it's an age-related thing, or a crowding and age-related thing. They will start to go downhill faster when they're in a larger colony. So that's one of the trade-offs for people keeping cultures of roaches and keeping pet roaches is, pet roaches can live like forever by bug standards. There was, I think there's somebody on the Roach forum who had a Fusca peruvianus cross or whatever, and that thing was kept like alone or in a teeny tiny colony in a huge container. And I believe they recorded it having lived for about 4.5 years, which is ridiculous. It's like crazy. And that was after it matured too. So this thing lived for 4.5 years as an adult. So when you have them in a breeding colony, there's putting pressure on each other, crowding, there's relatively limited food and water and space and all that stuff. And a warmer temperature ups their metabolism, blah, blah, blah. So people keeping pet roaches live a very long time if you keep them, just a couple other species or something in a larger enclosure compared to having a breeding colony. So it's one of the trade-offs there. I have a question. Some Eggs says, can you differentiate Leucomedeca subcincta and Varicosa as nymphs? Yes-ish. After about the 4th or 5th instar, Varicosa get orange markings on them. But I think sometimes it's very subtle on them. I'd have to go and look at Varicosa and see if there are any subadults that don't have the orange. I'm pretty sure they almost always have orange markings all across the abdomen and thorax. But when they're younger, they're pretty much identical. I don't know how you underfeed hissers. You can underfeed them. It depends on what your temperature and all that other stuff is. Most of the time, if you underfeed them, they'll just stop breeding. They're very well adapted to going through sort of stress periods. They can take a lot of stress. Most of them can, as long as temperature is temperature or humidity are in a good range. So keeping hissers cold and dry or hot and moist, they can usually take quite a bit of abuse. So they're in a large tank with soil sticks, etc. Another thing is that I've noticed hissers really don't like getting their somebody called it this a while ago on Roach Forum. I think that's right. The pulvilli, the little hairs on their tarsi, they really don't like getting gunk in there. So I usually, I really emphasize using chunky substrate with some roach species, with big pieces of mulch or coconut croutons in it. And this is because some stuff like the hissers, like fresh coconut fiber, fresh topsoil, or fresh things like that, seems to get in between their little their climbing body parts on their feet. And I would think then that either it's manually causing damage, or they have to constantly sit and groom to get the materials out of there when they have to walk on it constantly, versus a solid surface where that doesn't happen. So I think that something's going on there that causes their feet to deteriorate more faster on sort of powdery substrates, which is why eventually they do turn into just it's like a frassy mixture with the mulch and whatnot. But even then, the frass is still little chunks of stuff, so it doesn't seem to get stuck quite as easily as powdery, dusty substrates do. And sometimes roaches will eat their dead, and sometimes they don't. Annoyingly for me, a fair amount of the time they won't eat their dead in some of my bins, and I've always wondered why that is. Is it because they're getting everything that they need from the food that they're eating, or is it because the individual died of some sort of pathogen and they know not to eat it because it smells off to them? Joshua Campos, do I use any special hides for large arboreal roaches? Cork bark seems quite expensive. and hard to obtain in large sizes, and big sturdy bark is hard to find in nature. Do you ever use anything like plywood in these situations? Yes, historically I've used particle board that's been aged. I used to use it fresh, but I think it would be better because of the various adhesives and stuff that they use in it to, I don't know, set it outside for a couple of months, especially during the summer, or even bury it for a couple of weeks during the summertime so it can leach. And I don't think they don't treat lumber with the stuff that was it the copper was it an arsenic? It might have been an arsenic compound. They use safer or at least less dangerous chemicals in treated wood and stuff now, which I think applies to the particle board. So it'll leach and it'll get colonized by fungi and it'll start to break down and not be as unappealing to the roaches. But yeah, you can use particle board. And yeah, cork is. I have not a love-hate relationship with cork, but it's just like it it works sometimes. Some of the cork that you can buy, it's more of a thinner variety, and I found that the bugs tend to like that more. The thicker stuff does last forever, but either they treat it with something before it comes to the United States, or it has some sort of natural quality that makes it unappealing to bugs just fresh. So anytime I get cork, because sometimes I will buy it for stuff for different enclosures, especially if there's a nice small tube. A lot of things will like those small tubes of cork. I will thoroughly wash it with scalding hot water, and you'll notice that there's sort of it might just be tannins, some sort of yellowish, orangish, brownish material gets washed away with that. It might actually just be tannins. And aged cork is very good for pretty much any invertebrates, but the fresh stuff seems unappealing. So you can use that. I'm working on finding some sustainable sources for wood alternatives. And yeah, ivory head roaches, some eggs will pretty much shred anything you put in with them over time. But I'm working on sourcing some sustainable and affordable alternatives to cork bark. So I'm looking into. I have to actually get back to somebody on live oak, which is cork oak is an oak tree. Live oak is kind of the semi-equivalent from the southern United States. So depending on what the pricing ends up being for stuff, we'll see how that goes. But again, I have to have that shipped in, so it's more cost. So if I offer it retail on the site, I'm going to have to factor all that in. I can use it for wholesale price as much as I want for my bins, but if I'm going to make it available to other people, then make sure that it's sustainable on all ends. But then another option was I've been in touch with a person who manages a sustainable woodlot here in Michigan, and they often have basswood. And I was looking at some basswood cookies and cuts at Menards the other day, and I'm currently using some of those for Lanxoblata rudis, and they like it because it's very smooth, which is great because they're kind of picky and snobby on what surfaces they cling to, so they're liking it. And it's sturdy. Basswood is not really the best wood for making stuff. It is a semi-softer wood. I'm going to double check this before I sound like an idiot. Okay, so it's not a trash wood, like at least for carpentry stuff, like what's a trash wood? Hackberry, something that's very soft, and not on the trash level of like pine, where it's used for pulp and paper manufacturing. So basswood's like it seems to be sort of a decent mid-grade quality wood that's not excellent. But it's good enough for our purposes as bug keepers. Yeah, silver maple too, I guess, is kind of a trash wood. A lot of the fast-growing trees tend to be, other than like black locust, which is an exception. Yes, cork bark is sustainable. And they can harvest it from the same tree. The only thing is, what I mean by sustainable also here is people who have a lot of bugs and who go through a lot of wood can't be spending $30 on a piece of wood every time they start an enclosure. And with cork bark too, it's not like it's just $30 straight up. It's like you don't usually put one piece of bark in a culture. You put a couple pieces of bark. Um, and it does last a long time. So it has that going for it. But you're at the mercy of, the local markets and the availability and stuff like that. It's always going to be pricier to get something that's gone through all the rigorous importation. So I was told this a while ago. I don't know if things have changed since then. This was maybe around 2017. But I was told that there is only one import company in the United States for cork entities, and they're somewhere on the East Coast. And people told me, oh, there's other retailers and all there's other, but it all comes in through one company in one place on the East Coast as of 2017, and then that company redistributes it for cork product manufacturing, like actual corks for bottles and for note boards and all that stuff, and then also for all the reptile, invertebrate, amphibian, etc. usage. So they kind of have a monopoly on that for whatever reason. But again, as I said, having to import it is one thing. But then again, also, it's not the most effective wood product for us to use also because of how thick the bark can be and how ungainly it can be, which is great for some things that like to hide in all those furrows and whatnot. And like I said, I'm not bashing cork here because I do use it myself. But a lot of us want slabs of stuff, and we want slabs that have a slight curve to them, at least for roaches and even for isopods, so things can sort of get up underneath the different slabs, much like they would under a piece of bark that's curved and still adhering to a log. And so that's a big thing, is a lot of us want that, which is why it is a tragedy in more than one way that the emerald ash borer wiped out the ash trees in the Midwest, because right after that happened, there was an abundance of green and blue and white and red ash bark. And ash bark, in my humble opinion, is the best bark for rearing bugs. The best. Because it is sturdy, it's very palatable to everything you put on it. It is dual surfaced, where the upper surface has those nice deep furrows in it that things can hide under, and the underside is smooth, relatively smooth, and it's sturdy. I have some ash bark pieces in my enclosures that have been in there since 2010, maybe even before that. And I don't know exactly which species of ash that this came from because it died, and I am not a wood specialist, so I am pretty good at identifying trees around here. And I was a lot younger then, so I don't know what type of ash that it was. I would say maybe green ash was pretty common, but we're talking like the big, like 2 foot plus diameter trunk ash trees. And so I have that in some of my enclosures, and it's just held up perfectly. It's excellent for all kinds of roaches and isopods. It's just got a perfect structure, perfect everything. And so it's a real shame that it's not sustainable to collect anymore because you can't produce it in the first place. I will say, coming in second from my experience as an excellent bark is elm, surprisingly, because elms are considered kind of a trash tree. But especially for isopods, they seem to find the cambium very palatable. So fortunately, again, elm, despite the Dutch elm disease and whatnot, is a trash tree still. There's plenty of invasive elm trees that can be utilized for this. But elm is very good bark for isopods in particular. The only problem is that because it's so palatable and so good. They do tend to break it down by just eating it very quickly, which isn't as big of a problem with roaches. So, and even with the Dutch elm disease, actually, until last spring, I had a big American elm on the front corner of my house, and it was doing fine. So there are some trees that had adapted beyond that, seedlings that came up during the whole Dutch elm thing. Unfortunately, I had to cut it down because one, I'm looking to sell the house, and the tree's right up against the foundation, and two, also for those reasons. But I left the stump so I could grow a cross vine up it in the summertime, and also I inoculate with a bunch of mushrooms, so I'll have some free food, Pleurotus mushrooms. So, yeah, there's the thing of the cork. The other alternative I was talking about was basswood. I'm talking to somebody who owns a woodlot in Michigan and is currently harvesting one of the basswood trees there, and I was telling him about what I needed. Apparently, cookies are a little bit more difficult for them to produce, but the nice slabs are supposedly very easy. So I'm discussing getting these slabs from him and seeing what the price point would be. And, if I could get just a bunch of those slabs for somewhere between $2 and $4 each, that means I can very comfortably make them available retail for a very understandable amount. Joshua Campos says, I had ordered a bunch of large cork bark pieces a few months ago from a cheap source and still spent around $150. I was quite disappointed when I discovered there would only be enough for one enclosure. Yeah, again, that's the thing with the cork is, it holds up. It's hit or miss with whether or not things are going to like it right out of the box. And some eggs, tree cookies are when they cut. If you got the tree stump growing like this, basically a cross section that just goes like straight through it, and you end up with a circular piece. And those are pretty nifty because they hold up. They hold up pretty well. They keep some of the outer bark, etc. They're aesthetic. That's another thing. Another reason why I switch away from using the plywood and stuff like that isn't necessarily because it's ineffective. I may go back to it one day if I need to bump up my numbers of some feeder roach species. But it's not as aesthetic as having the sort of like natural bark pieces with their regularities and whatnot in the enclosure. So that's another reason it's pro cookies. But with the slabs, he can keep some of that outer bark. And I also told them that I'd be interested in any of the odds and ends stuff that they can't necessarily sell, but they can still cut up, into reasonably sized pieces. So I'm currently waiting to hear back and work more on that. Yeah, when you buy cork online, you don't know what the shape is going to be. You don't know if you're going to get one of those pieces that's just like this thick around and like this long. It's just like, how am I going to, like, half of the surface area is unusable basically to my bugs. It's just, I'm just ordering just a gigantic cork at that point. It's not even like a slab that you can lay down. And that's another thing is usually when I buy it at the local expo so I can see exactly what I'm getting. So that's very nice too. Mm-hmm. So, I have another point that I was going on about the supply stuff. I'm out of leaf litter. I've managed to run out of leaves. So I have several trash cans of oak processing downstairs in the spare room, and I'm waiting for the tans to leach and for them to start to rot. I had a friend who gave me a sack of red maple and mulberry leaves a couple weeks ago because he has a ton of it on his farm, and so I'm using that. And of course, the thing with the oaks and maples and stuff like that is maples become palatable to stuff much quicker than oak because the saponins and other phytochemicals just intrinsically break down faster after they leave the tree. So leaves become very palatable very quickly to detritivores, versus something like oak takes more time but is believed to be more nutritious, or at least foster better or higher quality bacteria colonies than maples and whatnot do. So fortunately, I can lean on that, but it also means I can't have any on the site until I establish I have enough for myself moving into the future. I can't collect more from the yard until the spring either, because everything's covered in snow. Yeah, oak leaves are thick. And thank you for the offer, Alex. But like I said, I'm not in an emergency situation, because I can flex to the maple leaves. And I have just enough oak left for now to finish up the new bins and whatnot I have to do. So just a matter of, it's nice to be able to sell things and to give people supplies when they need them. So in the future, I may actually, when I have the space to do this, the park in the city I used to live in, Dearborn, there's a park that does a leaf roundup every year, because it's a park where people walk through, and the baseball diamonds and all that stuff. But there's a huge old oak forest that is located there, and so they gather up all the leaves and have them hauled off to who knows where. So I may look into contacting the city in the future when I move to another place where I can accommodate such a thing, and see if I can either, because I don't know if they actually need those leaves. Some of these companies that do removal of things like trees and whatnot, it actually costs them money to have to dispose of the things that they collect. So things like mulch, you can get mulch for free very easily by flagging down somebody who's having a tree cut down and say, hey, can you drop the mulch off here? Hey, can I get some of that mulch or whatever? So I might be able to get them to deliver all of those leaves to the future property, and then I will never run out of oak leaves, because I have a gigantic pile of them and a gigantic vat of aging them at any given time. So, but that's the future. That's not the now. So, so Meg says, my city parks are mostly just honeysuckle and white mulberries. So it really feels to me like the park that I'm referring to was cut into the forest that used to be there, because some of the trees are too old to have been planted in the relatively recent past. It really seems like another thing that supports this is that there are common true katydids in that park. I'm pretty sure that common true katydids are flightless. I might be wrong about that, though. At least maybe females are, because I know that the oak forest in my yard is the original. It's the original flora composition of this area, based on the other plants that are found there in the age of the trees, and having talked to people who lived in this neighborhood for a while. So, but there's no common true katydids in my yard. And I imagine that's because of habitat fragmentation or something like that. Maybe they've never been here, but I think it's more likely that they were here at some point and then died off for whatever reason. But anyways, at this other park, there's tons of common true katydids, which, as I mentioned before, I suspect do not have very good dispersal. I usually find them in intact habitats or on the edge of intact habitats, because they can't disperse as well as something like a microcentrum, anglewings, that are very well known for being good flyers. So, but in this park, it's all the huge oak trees, and there were trees the city planted in other places that were clear cut, and no understory. It's just it's just maintained as grass for people to walk on and picnic on and whatnot. It's actually quite aesthetic, and it's nice that the oaks are still there, because you still get tons of squirrels are supported, and you get a bunch of ground bees in the spring and all that stuff. It would be nice if there were some patches of native brush or something like that maintained, but so anyway, so it's like that. My neighbor has a huge magnolia tree, says Joey, and I got 2 garbage bags full. Going to talk to him next year about getting all of it to trade with. Yeah, if it's one of those southern magnolias with the really durable leaves, those are good for structure for a lot of things that live in leaf litter. But it's the stuff that rots really, really quickly that a lot of the detritivores go for. I had some bags of I think it was some sort of like hybrid Asian magnolia, and the leaves were like paper thin and just very wispy. And stuff didn't seem to like them as much as I had suspected they would for being such a thin and seemingly palatable leaf. So, um, so yeah, out of leaves. Trying to think of what else. Species to add to the website. To think about this. Okay, so off the top of my head, I've been talking about doing this gigantic roach dump for a while now. And off the top of my head, and actually I can reference some of the stuff that's back there. So I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between like 20 and 30 new species or strains, or maybe more than that. I have to double check on everything. Let's see, and this is all new stuff. I don't think I ever added Blatella vega or Blatella acini to the website. I want to say it's vega that's not on there. I might throw up a page for those. We had the discussion last week about potential Wolbachia infestation in my older colony, and so I have this newer set from Alan that I have up here somewhere that I showed earlier for the container type. Let's see. Yeah, it's hitting on the natural park near where I used to live. Some eggs says some lawns like that have spring beauty and violets that can survive mowing. Yeah, I don't even think there's any of either of those in that park. I don't even know if it gets mowed. It's just all the foot traffic from people makes it so only grass can survive, other than the trees. So let's see, stuff to add to the site. Balta naculata. Going to be a lot of ectobiids, I think, on this list now that I think about it. Or maybe not. I'll let the brain gears keep turning. Very ornate, small species. The nymphs definitely growing on me as far as their coloration and patterning. They're doing very well for me. So that's a species I'm pretty excited to offer. I know a couple of people in the U.S. have Balta violus. I need to get those again. Some of the ectobiids, they all look the same and they all have kind of annoying husbandry. And Balta husbandry, although they're not as psychotic as Latiblatella, they look almost identical to Latiblatella and they're a little easier. So I had Latiblatella at the time where I could have gotten violus, and I just started saying, not yet. But now it's like, okay, why not? So the Balta naculata is very pretty, both the adults and the nymphs. The nymphs, I think, are prettier, but the adults have those sort of wispy, grayish, silver blue ectobiid eyes, and they have a nice patchwork of like white and sort of like a red brown of very, very tiny, thin stripes on them. So be adding those. Pseudoglomerus magnifica. Okay, there we go. The cuck flongs. Those are getting added. I'm gonna probably put contact for availability. I would like them to contribute to drawing in some site traffic. They're doing well for me. I think that once the babies I have hit the third instar, I can feel confident saying, okay, I know how to breed these. I will have them, and therefore I'm gonna add them to the website anyways because they're really awesome, and definitely one of those roaches that a lot of people are constantly looking for right now, and fixating on them because they're pretty and green and ignoring all the other dozens, tens of other amazing species of roaches that we have. The Balta naculata are not very picky. They just like to be dry and well ventilated, or at least they like to be dry and well ventilated with a humid corner. And that a lot of ectobiids tend to like very, very high ventilation, and they will tolerate and actually seem to prefer drier conditions as long as they can have something to drink or there's like a humid corner to retreat to. More important is allowing them to get moisture by drinking it when they need it versus it necessarily always being present. So pseudoglomerus, I think I took down the Paraspherus page because it was up and I had them available readily for a couple of years and then took it down. Oh no, I still have Paraspherus pygmaeus on here from way back when I had that nice thriving colony at my parents' house. My parents' nice dry bungalow, suburban bungalow. Neoblatella already on the site. Latiblatella already on the site. Caryblata minima, blah, blah, blah. Euthlastoblatus species Ocala. There's a ton of ooths in there. They've gotten to the point where they started laying ooths on top of other ooths. And so I get a good hatch of those. One hatch I will be able to send to the people who really want them off the bat, who I need to send them to, which are Alan and TJ, because I owe Alan for sending them to me in the first place and entrusting me with them and me not killing them so Alan doesn't chop my genitals off. So he's getting them. TJ really, really wanted them because they're, rare roach and probably undescribed if they are in fact Euthlastoblata, which they should be. I don't see why they shouldn't be. They look almost identical to Euthlastoblata diaphana, except they're twice the size and even prettier as nymphs. So those will be going on there as species Ocala. We'll see where that goes. Loboptera decipiens. It's a small, I think they're Brachypterus or Micropterus female. I have to really look at a picture of this. Hard with teeny tiny dark roaches because you can't really see right off the bat if they're Micropterus or Apterus. If they have little teeny tiny wings or if they have no wings at all. I'm pretty sure they're Micropterus. Anyways, so that one's been kind of a thorn in my side for a while. They do like very dry conditions, but they seem to be very picky for some reason about something. It's very annoying because when you can't pinpoint exactly what that thing is, so you get a colony that just sort of does okay for a while, and then does really good, and then does sort of okay again. So, but they're very cute. They have a nice little white skirt around the body. I feel like they're well studied in Europe for something, or well documented, so they're not an uncommon roach there, but it kind of falls in the category of small and tiny ectobiids that are all over and extremely abundant in the wild, but then you bring them in captivity and you have to figure out what it is that makes them so abundant because you haven't offered it to them before because they all die every time you try with them. So the Ectobius pallidus treatment. Speaking of which, Ectobius pallidus will be added to the website as well. I feel like I'm going to... My yard is full of Ectobius pallidus. I have F1 babies that I've chilled in the fridge for 2 months, and not F1 generation, and not babies and hatchlings as in like subadultish. So now they're at room temperature. We're going to see if that cooling at that temperature has been long enough to break their diapause, because Ectobius do have a pretty hardcore diapause requirement. And so I think I'm going to list them anyways. I'd like to have them on there because again, they're all over my yard. I brought them in the house a couple times, and I bring plants in for the winter, and they just persist. They'll pop up inside in the summer. I think one of them got into the house during the summertime and laid an ooth in one of the potted plants, and then I had babies hatch out one of the potted plants to like my living room. So I'll be adding them as an option to have them wild collected if people want them, because again, they're everywhere and I can do that for people who want to give them a try. But also, hopefully, I will get an F2 out of these F1s. So if they mature and produce babies, then it will probably, I think I talked to TJ about this, this might be the first true complete captive breeding of Ectobius pallidus, maybe of any Ectobius species. So those will be on there. And, another tiny Ectobiid. Parcoblata zebra. Parcoblata zebra, locality bull. Could they overwinter in an outdoor cage in Foco? Where Where's FOCO? I don't know where that is. I don't know what their threshold is for the diapause requirement, but I know that if I go outside now, if I really wanted to, somebody paid me $1 million to go outside and find some Ectobius pallidus, I could. They just sort of like scrunch up and fall on their backs and like live under the leaf litter like that until springtime or until there's a break in the weather. I've seen them active or semi-active when there's snow on the ground like that. Oh, Fort Collins. Probably. There might be something else about your climate that discourages them from already infesting there. Buell. Oh, it's called Buell? Buell. Okay. Parcoblata zebra, as I have been informed, locality Buell. It's probably the dryness, Alex, what prevents them from living there. There's other ectobiids, I'm sure, that are better adapted to the incessant dryness. Parcoblata zebra Buell. Parcoblata zebra is probably the prettiest Parcoblata species, and being a big fan of Parcoblata kind of hurts me to say that, but the females usually have orangish pronotums, and the body sort of a dark chocolate brown striped with white stripes, and the elytra are like an orangish brown. The very, very pretty Parcoblata. And Lata is also very pretty, but Parcoblata zebra, probably the crown jewel of Parcoblatas, maybe. So those will be available. I was down to a single pair from individuals that Alan had sent me, and then I isolated them out of whatever set they were in and forgot about the container for a couple of weeks, but they had food and water, so it's like, okay, whatever. And all of the ones that I isolated, I think it was a very small group. It was under a dozen, maybe even under 10. Alan says Montgomery and zebra are prettier, but I'm just saying the species in general is probably the prettiest of the Parcoblatas to the uncultured, that is. So, anyways, so I was down to this pair. I was down to like 2 subadults or something, and all of them died except for these 2 in this little temporary enclosure that I had for them. And then, part of me was discouraged because I was like, oh, maybe we're going to go through that Parcoblata crap where, they needed a diapause or something like that or whatever. And then I watered and they both eclosed, and I was like, okay, they both look perfect and fine. So I took them and put them in one of these fancy setups that I constantly take care of up here to get the best results. And the female's just been, just cranking out eggs. Like each ooth must have maybe 30 to 40 eggs in it, maybe. And she's just been laying them like crazy. And every time I look at her, she's a massive like sausage. So she's just cranking them out. And I found the first babies maybe a week ago. So pretty sure they're going to be established. I don't think I can screw up after this, considering I went down to a pair and they're doing so well like this now. Satchel says, according to my stepbrother, someone once called Buell God's country, and he responded that he didn't know God dabbled in methamphetamines. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So yeah, beautiful Buell and their methamphetamines. But I remember the first Parcoblata zebra I had from Alan, I think, sent them to me. I had one culture going, and of course the adults can climb, and my containment protocol were not as neurotic as they are nowadays. It's pretty neurotic, but not as neurotic. But I think a female or 2 got into my Doralea orani colony. This would have been back around 2014, 15, I think. And I was keeping the Doralea pretty moist because that was the thought at the time, was they needed very high moisture. And the zebra infested that bin to the point where I remember I have memories of trying to, where I went in there and had to euthanize a bunch of them because I didn't want them risking the integrity of the Doralea or causing any sort of problems. I went there, just euthanized tons of Parker Pallidus zebra, and of course, then after once I lost the colony to zebra, I immediately regretted that. So, but Alan brought up that they're usually found in swampier, moister places. So zebra might be more of a swamp or higher humidity adapted species, which may have been why, without a diapause, which may have been why I wasn't having good luck with them. I wasn't keeping them humid enough. Versus in here where I keep better tabs and everything, I'm able to add more humidity. There's better, more appealing microclimates in this enclosure. So Parker Pallidus zebra will be added to the list. Corsinura parrishi, from the 6 or 7 adults that Alan collected on our March Florida trip. There's a lot. A ton. There's a ton of Corsinura parrishi now, to the point where Alan and I were talking about how should they be priced, considering it's always a pain in the ass to collect them. And this is from me just going out and finding the first one with Alan accidentally, and then Alan giving multiple other goes to collecting more Corsinura. And apparently they're easier at some times of the year and under some conditions to find. But you'll never find like 100 in a day. You'll find like maybe a dozen maximum. We were trying to discuss, like, originally when I got them going, like, what should the pricing be like? Should $12 for $100 or something like that, considering all the effort we put into getting these and how often people fail with them. But, we have this, now the colony has this whole elite effect going and whatnot, and there's good numbers, and I'm getting more individuals sent around to people. TJ was having some good success with them. And, I think they're and they did well over the summer, which is when a lot of Ectobias usually die off for me, and they were just fine. So I'm really thinking that they may have a place as a feeder, as a very mainstay common feeder in the future for a lot of things, because Will and I were talking about using them for pseudoscorpions, because we're trying to mass produce Tarantulas, CF Tarantulas from Arcadia, and I brought up the story of how the first pseudoscorpions from there that I got going, I dumped in with my Latiblatella, which exploded in number, and then the pseudoscorpions ate all the Latiblatella, and so I ended up with a bunch of pseudoscorpions, but that was before I really, really cared about them, so I didn't bother to try and replicate those conditions. So anyways, the parrishi may have a place as a good microfeeder for all kinds of stuff, from dart frogs to Braden, as you know, to pygmy chameleons and whatnot. And we're going to look into making a Tarantulas setup where they are fed primarily the Corsinura parrishi, which is cultured in situ, and then eventually maybe get to the point where we just have to move a couple of adult Tarantulas between bins and alternate as the population fluctuates and whatnot to keep them going. So those will be added. I'll probably add them on the feeder page. So Alan and I still need to get some value out of it, considering we're the crazy people who went out and looked for them. And by that I mean I looked for them, but Alan had all the success during the spring Florida trip. The adult size and Corsinura parrishi is, I'm pulling up it's about a centimeter, maybe less. About a centimeter. But the thing is, the babies hatch out stupidly tiny. So even smaller than Nocticola babies, they hatch out at maybe like 1.52 millimeters, which is perfect, something immediate at that size, and then they just get meatier as they keep growing. And so I think they have some real potential there, because people love meaty microfeeders, and it's good to be able to offer a diversity of behaviors in your microfeeder. So we have the paraplecta currently, which sort of hide under like loose debris, and they're not exceptionally active above that when they have the option. We have the Compsodies, which behave similarly but are a little bit less clingy to their substrates. and of course they have a smaller size, so that's nice too. Nocticola, which also behaves fairly similarly to the Compsodies, but they're smaller and they require more moisture. And so, but the Corsinura are constantly up and active in the substrate and on top of things, which is excellent for things that are actively hunting them that aren't necessarily living underneath other stuff. Alan says we need to make Cariblata available again. Yes, well, those are up in there. So I already have them on the website, but I already added them. The only thing with the Corsinura is the fact that they climb and they fly. That's the one trade-off. As what I was mentioning with all the other tiny feeder roaches, they usually have only climbing adult males, which has been the appeal there. And it kind of goes hand in hand with their behavior, where the roaches that are more inclined to burrow or hide underneath stuff usually don't have the adaptation to climb, or they don't have the behavior to go up. Having climbing is usually for things that are not necessarily arboreal, but that tend to climb and scale things like plant stalks or live in like upper leaf litter or something like that. Environments where they need that. Things that live underneath stuff have usually either lost those or never had them in the first place. So the Corsinura, they are very, very good climbers and flyers, but they're so small, and it's like no chance that they could be invasive because they just don't seem to do well in the wild. It's not known if they're strictly introduced to Florida or if they got there on their own. I don't know about the records for their presence in the Caribbean islands and whatnot. But we already have a Corsinura that's native to the United States, Corsinura texensis, which I'm not going to add them, but I have them. And thank you, Alan, for going out and collecting more of them. But Corsinura texensis are larger. Everybody's consistently had problems with those two and can't get them to breed. And they're strictly native to the to southeastern United States. And so, but we haven't been able to get those going. And part of that seems to be because they might need a diapause as some adults. They're also, the babies of those were also very good climbers. And there's also the fact that a lot of these like good ventilation and whatnot. But anyway, so texensis has not been a good fit for a number of reasons. But with a tropical species like Parashai, it's much better for constantly propagating. So, but these can be good because they have that more up and active and about and climbing on stuff behavior. But the trade-off again is you kind of have to treat them like fruit flies because of that. Whatever protocol people use for keeping fruit flies in their containers or from getting all over the place, you'd have to apply with the Corsinura Parashai, with the other asterisk that they will reproduce in your setup most likely, unless it's way too humid or something like that. So Corsinura Parashai will be added to the site, probably as a more of an upscale feeder species. So, it's two sides of the coin. On the one hand, it's very nice to make money. It's very nice to make money off of new species that painstakingly work to establish or to find. On the flip side, it's also very nice to be able to offer people something that they need. And there's definitely a dire need for something with the dimensions and behavior and whatnot, of course, in Parashai. And I just have so many of them. Why not offer them as a feeder? So those will be added. Hemithyrsocerus vittata. We have third instars. I was complaining, or not really complaining. I was more broadcasting for a couple of weeks now with Hemithyrsocerus vittata that I wasn't going to put them on the site until I had third instar nymphs because I wanted to be sure that I had the husbandry down to get them from first instar to at least third instar, where their sort of morphology changes and they seem to become less fragile. And so every time that I had gotten an F1 of Hemithyrsocerus vittata in the past, I would usually lose them. They'd just die because the ventilation wasn't right, the temperature wasn't right, blah, blah. Something was wrong at the time. I have third instars now, so I can start offering them because I feel confident with the husbandry and whatnot. And that's an exciting roach for me to offer, again, having overcome the failures twice and now having a very large colony of them going. And very surprisingly, For roaches that have sort of the dimensions of German roaches on steroids, and for being extremely beautiful, probably one of the most beautiful roaches in culture. Roach that is also very roachy in their morphology, at least in later instars, and just something that looks like it should breed very quickly, breed and grow very, very quickly, and yet they don't. They take forever to do everything. I was bemoaning, I think, on the first live stream how I had adults for months and I hadn't seen any babies pop up. Oh, look, a Russian bot, maybe. At least I'm getting views. So anyways, it took forever to mature, took forever to produce ooths, took forever for babies to pop up. And now I think when I had found babies was probably like November, mid-November, early November. So it's taken them almost 2 months to molt twice. Yeah. First and second and third. It's taken them almost a month to molt each time, and it's only going to slow down as they get bigger too. Usually it's a trend with roaches. The first couple instars, they will molt more rapidly than the later instars. So despite looking like a roach that should breed like wildfire, they're taking forever to do everything, which also makes them a good pet roach, I guess, because they'll live a long time, and you'll get to watch them as they grow. You have to keep your fingers crossed and just sit there constantly waiting for them to do everything. But it's not like they are relatively prolific, though. I have a lot of nymphs, but like I said, it just takes forever for everything to happen with them, even under ideal conditions. So those will be added, and they will also be the roach that I'll be putting on the homepage this year. Last year's was the Archbold or Lake Placid Aranavega floridensis. This year's will be the Hemipthasura vittata. I like to wait for a subadult to pop up so I get the nice black, red, and blue. Or maybe I'll go with an adult because, you know, the nice contrasting black, white, and yellow. You really can't go wrong with Hemipthasura. Just one of the coolest roaches all around with their morphological changes as they grow and their coloration. You just couldn't ask for more in a pet cockroach. Other than maybe not flying as much. But that's half the fun, is watching them look like, I think they're wasp mimics or something like that as adults. So Hazy asked, do you keep any tarantulas? I used to have more tarantulas. I found that tarantulas are not quite my thing per se. I have developed a big soft spot for dwarf tarantulas and for Aphonopelmas. So currently I have, I think we talked about this last week, because I always chuckle when I have to say it. For dwarfs, I have some sort of Aphonopelma that we found in Sahuarita in Arizona, and a Titicuddle elbow pilosum that I got a couple of months ago at an expo, and I'm looking for a male for. I'm trying to get some Euathlus tectanorum. It's a supposedly dwarf species, even though the adult females, I think, get a leg span of like 5 inches or something like that. So I'm trying to get some slings of those. The person hasn't been very responsive, but it's a species that isn't often kept, and so I like that, and the fact that it's supposed to be on the smaller side. And I will be looking for some Davis species and some other misc small stuff. People are constantly trying to convince me to get some pumpkin patches. It's just something about them isn't the most appealing to me, but if somebody offered me like 20 slings for like swap, I couldn't say no to that. They always seem a little bit pricey, even though they're very common. So I would like to get some more Davis. I really have a soft spot for Davis phaseatus. I might get some Pentaloris in a couple of weeks. There's another species, Cirrocosmus elegans, is it? One with a little heart on its butt. Yeah, so I might, I have an expo coming up on Saturday, so I probably do a little bit of looking around there. The problem with tarantulas at expos is like people usually bring one of something, or they bring like a teeny tiny sling. And like for me, the goal is always to sort of like, oh, I'd like to breed this eventually. So, Satchel, I don't think I'm getting any of yours from Alan. I don't think there's anything exceptionally appealing to me on the list. Or Alan decided to keep all the really good stuff. So, but yeah, so for teas, it's like I want to be able to get a little group of something so I can work with it, swap slings with somebody eventually to get unrelated ones or what have you. So that's it for tarantulas for me for now. Again, if I have somebody makes me some good offers on a swap or something for another dwarf species, I'd try to take them up on it. So, continuing on with roaches that I need to list on the site, new things I'm adding. I'm going to just go through my racks in my head here. I may be, Alan's keeping the Pallidus from Yuma. And I'm sure Alan will share some slings with me if he produces any in the future, because I did rather like those Yuma Pallidus. I have some Aranavega to add. I have Boliana del Rio, which is the darker color locality phase of Aranavega Boliana. I already put the was it Boone County ones on there, which came from the gentleman who, if he's listening to this, he will know this. I will refer to him by this title into the future because I'm very amused by it. It's a great nickname, I feel. Uncle Fengus Khan. Uncle Fengus sent me the colony of Aranavega Boliana from Hill County. I have to look at my website because there's a lot of descriptions for this area. Born, the Aranavega Boliana born. So these came from Uncle Fengus, and he's been propagating them for quite a while. Has probably better luck with Aranavega Boliana than most other people had up until that point. He's had the colony going for a while, versus the Del Rios, which all of us other Roach folks just started getting whenever Alan started being generous with them last year. So I'll have the two different spots of Aranavega Boliana. I may add a couple of these ones from the trip. I'm currently, I mentioned this last week, kind of fighting off some grain mites in a few of them because I added more food, so a couple of localities would stop eating their ooths, and then some grain mites popped up, and this winter is an excellent time for grain mites to pop up, and blah, blah, blah. So fighting this battle with keeping them on the heat and waiting for the water to evaporate and the grain mites to die, and then having to feed them again. And it's just sort of this balancing act that's going on here right now. So that will affect the availability of some of them. But a few of them I may list. Let's see, anything else lurking in here. I'm not going to put the Pseudoglomerus tarsalis on there. It's very presumptuous of me to have just gotten them today and then assume I'm going to be able to produce some. So I'm not going to do that. But the Pseudoglomerus magnifica, yeah, the bad boys are going on. Bantua robusta Namibia will be going on the site. Again, the Paraspherean roach that has reignited my confidence with the subfamily, and they're really cool. We're getting, we roach folk in the last 5 years have been getting so many cool species, and the isopod people smuggling stuff in left and right, they just kind of like, they get something, and like some big isopod website will get some new Cubaris or Nasodillo, and it'll just be like, who cares? They just get another 10 localities in the next week, and people dump another $1,000 into them or whatever. And it's like there's no sense of like of propagating and continuing and cultivating and keeping track of stuff. And people are just flocking to isopods when they get some wild-caught cubaris that looks identical to an armadillidium that they've been culturing for 5 years now or something like that. So, but then we humble roach folk, we get something like these Bantua, where you get these weird-ass males, just super lanky, long wings, and the females look like a bullet or a barrel, depending on what common name you'd like to use. It's just bizarre looking insects. And so, and some eggs, I do love isopods. I love all the lines that I work with. I really love being able to have a diversity of species available. And I love even more than that isopods, because of their faster reproduction, at least some species of isopods, their faster reproduction and their more generous intrinsic color palette, it makes it very easy to selectively breed for all kinds of cool looking weird things, and seeing what happens when you cross these two localities and you pick out the colors. And they're very interesting to me on a genetic level and on creating basically living art, which is why I'm drawn to things like Porcellio scaber that are naturally very polychromic. But I do not appreciate the direction the isopod hobby has gone, with people not having true breeding lines and messing up stuff and not knowing what they're selling and not knowing what this is, and things, not even a Latin. I love in roaches how everybody is obsessed with the Latin names, and even if they're stuff gets outdated or whatever, everything has a very specific name, and you can talk to other keepers and we all get on the same page about stuff. And with isopods, it's just like people like, oh, I have Spanish oranges. Oh, what species are they? Oh, I don't know. They're Spanish oranges. It's like, and there's some casual roach keepers who are like that. It's like, it's fine, but I don't like that it's so difficult. If I want to get, I would like a pure, uncontaminated, true breeding line of X, Y, or Z. I have to go on a detective sleuthing hunt to find somebody who bought 2 of them from me 10 years ago to hopefully get this pure stock back. I can't just go on any website and find pure this or that or this or that. I have to go through all this trouble, and then I have to also, or I have to do the work myself, which is, Hazy asked, will a corner of moist sphagnum moss be enough as a human retreat for Euricota species? More than enough for Floridana, more than enough for Lixa. Decipiens tend to like it a little bit more moist. I get the feeling that they're from more moisture habitats, like maybe even true rainforest in the wild. Improsora will do fine with that too. Actually, Decipiens and Improsora both occur on Puerto Rico. Improsora is in the dry forests on the east side of the island, so it's more like scrubland in Florida than the other parts of Puerto Rico. And I've seen where Improsora were collected, and it looks like a snapshot of certain parts of Florida. There's a lot of bromeliads and other epiphytes, and there's Spanish moss everywhere too. So, which you don't usually see in some places like Fort Lauderdale in Florida, where the humidities, there's apparently too much humidity for Spanish moss. It's too much heat or humidity there in Fort Lauderdale. So yeah, that will work for most Euricota species. And you'll probably find that they end up piling all their ooths on the humid spot too, which is kind of handy for keeping track of them. So, roaches. Continue on with a list of roaches. Let's see what else is percolating downstairs. Pargoblatta pennsylvanica from Montgomery or Tuscaloosa. Alan, I always mix this up. The label on the container is right. It's just my brain memory that is not right. I'm going to get a sip over and eat this pickle. Oh, I've been talking for so long. Holy crap, we're almost at 2 hours. Ooh. So, Alan says Tuscaloosa for the pennsylvanica. I have a single pair or a couple pairs of Pargoblatta pennsylvanica nymphs from Ann Arbor in Michigan. very, extremely different looking than the Southern Pennsylvanica. And, maybe if I have the chance, I might try crossing the two lines to see if that would provide anything interesting in a couple of months if I have colonies going of both. I'll have the Parkablata Pennsylvanica from Tuscaloosa ready for putting on the site. So Pennsylvanica will make its glorious return, although not quite as glorious as having the full-size Northern Pennsylvanica. Let's see, other species that are good to go. New species. Panethia angustipennis cognata from Laos will be ready to be put on the site. It has been about a little over a year since I received a couple of small nymphs, and I now have a very booming colony of them going, which is the most success that I've had with a Panethia. I also have some from Cambodia, the same subspecies, just a different locality. I may not hold on to both colonies in the future. I would really like to get Spatica again. Those are the larger black ones. But Cognata is the one with the orange spot on its back, which people, for some reason, have not really been able to get going. Did I have Spatica before? I think I had Spatica. I can't remember. I had one species back around 2014 or 2015. Very sparing reproduction out of them. I feel like my husbandry methods have improved, been able to give them better quality rotting wood and whatnot now. So we'll be offering Panethia angustipennis cognata from Laos on the website pretty soon. Let's see. Continue. Paraplaneta americana black. I put venom on the website before I put the black on, but that's just the basic default Paraplaneta americana without the white eyes, as you see in the venoms. They're not sure. They're kind of overshadowed by the venoms because of the eyes, but I like them. They have a whole 10-gallon tank full of them, so it's like, okay. Let's see. In my head, I'm going through all the colonies that I have. Blabberus Colossius Panama, I've been selling them for about a year now because as my other Colossius colonies fluctuate and I oversell, I've been offering the Panamas. So those will be going up there. They're very similar to the Perus, almost identical in every single way. So those will be put on the website too. Brain, let's see. I'm going through all the containers in my head. What else is on that rack? Blabberus discoidalis, Redlands from Redlands, Florida. I was sent a group. We went out to this site in March, and it's where we found some of the Corsinera parashai and a bunch of other really weird stuff. It's this row where apparently people get taken to die and stuff out in the middle of the Everglades, sent a bunch of trash and furniture and all kinds of stuff, but obviously all kinds of cool herps and inverts there too. And we looked all over to try and find some Blabberus discoidalis, and no luck. It might have been too cold or wrong time of year or something. But anyways, the collector went back several months later and was able to find a fair number of discoidalis there, so he sent me some of those. So we'll have another pure locality of Blabberus discoidalis from the mainland now, which is neat. So we now have two pure locales in Banana Bay and Redlands, which is nice because it seems the Blabberus in Florida are at risk of being extirpated because of changes in land and area use and pesticides and stuff. Joshua Campos asked, do you put any sort of layer in between the lids on your 10-gallon tanks for additional security? Yes, I do. For some things, I'll use the frost cloth, and for some other things, I'll use I think it's a nylon mesh that you can buy at like Joann Fabrics. So yes, I have both the barrier, gasket seal, as well as an extra layer of frost cloth or this sort of mesh material. So Blabberus discoidalis, Redlands, Panethia, actual Panchlora nivea from Tuscaloosa will be added to the website. So if anybody here hasn't read up on the fiasco with Hobby Panchlora, how actually all these years, unless people collected their colonies from the wild somewhere in the southeast, the species that we've been exchanging is actually not Nivea. It's some unidentified species that's been circulating and going in and out of Florida and all kinds of other stuff. So we have species Hobby and we have Nivea. And these Panchlora nivea from Tuscaloosa are the ones that Satchel sent me last year in October or November that actually spurred this investigation into the different Panchlora in culture. And so those will be made available. Panchlora CF nivea redlands or papaya, which is the ones from the papaya fields that we visited in March. And unknown, they're probably Nivea, but some of the adult females are very light colored. Even after they've hardened up after maturing, they're more of like it's like a, I don't know what that color. It's like a meringue or something. Very very just, it's basically white with just a touch of green. So I may try and isolate that as its own sort of line. But those are very cool. Panchlora CF nivea. Let me see what city that was in. Wimauma, Florida. Panchlora CF nivea, Wimauma, Florida. These ones I'm very very intrigued by because a lot of the ones that are maturing have sort of bluish underlayings in their coloration. Like some of the, like the middle of the pronotum and whatnot, have just a touch of blue. It's noticeable. It's not crazy, but it's there. Maybe it could be selected for, I don't know, but it's more noticeable than any other wild caught Panchlora, probably Nivea colonies that we have. So I think that's very interesting about them. Some eggs. Did you talk to farmers to go on their land or just scan the edges of the papaya field? We were actually we were brought into the papaya field by our guide. I'm not sure if he wants to be mentioned here. He'd probably be fine with it. But the gentleman who was sort of showing us around the redlands in Florida actually took us. He had permission to. He knew the owner of the property, so he actually got us into the papaya fields. We were there. It was authorized. If not, we would have been shot. So, but yeah, he went with us and was looking around and showing us everything. Joshua Campos says, great to know. On the gasket seal for the tanks is created using cheesecloth, you said. Right, getting very close to getting up new enclosure, so just making sure I'm getting everything right. It's frost cloth for all of this stuff. And the other material, like I said, is some sort of, it's like a nylon-y material from Joanne Fabrics. So anyways, yeah, bunch of Panchlora. I received some Panchlora species Guadalupe from TJ. They seem to be doing okay. They were all very small nymphs. I may actually have to get a booster colony from him, depending on what sex ratios, etc., mature. But they're doing well, so those will probably be available all if everything goes well. I don't know, 4 months ish. Panchlora, a lot of the smaller Panchlora seem to be pretty fast growing. So Panchlora species Guadalupe, Panchlora nivea Tuscaloosa, Panchlora CF nivea redlands, Panchlora CF nivea Wimauma. Another Panchlora I need to add on to all this. Species white, but they're not going to be ready yet, so I'm not going to add them to the site. I'm only adding things that I'm going to have available, or that I feel confident, 100% confident that I'll have available within the next month or two. Let's see other things for roaches for the site. I know there were a couple more. Maybe Arenovega floridensis Tampa might go on there. That's one of the darker and more colorful Arenovega floridensis localities. They have a little bit of red on them. I have to see how my colony is going or doing. Eucharidia not going to be ready going with the near future. No Gronfodorina, no Princessia, Blabberus giganteus Trinidad. I don't know if I'll add them. I need to see if I have adults. Those were from Uncle Fengus. So we'll see if they'll be on the docket. There's more strains of stuff. Maybe more Parkoblatta than I'm forgetting. I'm trying to think of all the containers that I have downstairs. Oxy, hello, are all good to go. I need to restart my Eschnopter Darapeltiformis again. I spoke too soon. When I told Samson last year that I probably would never need him to find any more again, and then they crashed over the summer. I went from having hundreds for most of early spring to early summer to having none. And I think that it was because I think what happened is some mold started growing. There weren't enough babies to constantly eat back the mold. And so it would smother the food, and I wasn't doing regular maintenance, so I wasn't clearing off the food or whatnot. And so they basically probably starved to death in that setup, even though they had plenty of food otherwise, because all my other Eschnopter are doing exceptional, including the species Perry's. So I still have Eschnopter Darapeltiformis on the site. I just leave it up there because I don't want to take the page down, because I just always like, oh, you can't take it down. You can get those again very easily. So the plan this year, pending Samson being able to collect a couple in the springtime or late winter or whatever, is throw them in one of those. They'll be getting the special treatment upstairs with heat and everything, and I think from there we should be good. I might bump them to advanced on the care level guide because of this very reason. Will Parkoblatta Divisa ever be back in stock? I don't think so, Hazy. And well, not in the near future. Actually, Divisa and Latta, in March, I'm driving down to Alabama to collect with Alan. And so their availability for this very reason, because I'm sort of tired of messing around with kind of just a handful of medium-ish nymphs at a time. I would like to go and collect a couple dozen subadults of each that are just about to break any sort of diapause they may have, so I can bring them back and just have them crank out a ton of babies and finally be done with it and have big colonies within a very short period of time. So I will be collecting Divisa and Latta and maybe Virginica. I have a pretty okay colony of Virginica from Montgomery or Tuscaloosa. But yeah, a Parkoblatta Notha will be available in this next update. I constantly forget I have them because they live in with my Elliptorhina chopardi. And so this is a long distance cross of Parkoblatta Notha, which is the only reason we have them, because Alan crossed one individual we found in Chiricahuas with one that we found in the Santa Ritas, and that's why we even have them in the first place in culture, is because of that. Alan abandoned his morals and did a locality cross to create a hobby strain. So, but Alan and I also did send Alan a pair that I collected in the Chiricahuas this last September. So, maybe eventually I ditch the hobby strain and get those if Alan could get them to propagate and have like billions of them. So, Parkoblatta Notha will be available with the next update. Because they're doing very, very well. It took them forever to mature because I only had like 12 from F1s that I produced from the ones Alan sent me. And I just have a bunch of them. But it's kind of concerning because even though I have adults emerging here and there, I don't think I've seen any newborns pop up in the enclosure. It might be because the ooths are getting eaten because they're in a warmer enclosure. There's plenty of food. So I don't know. They're doing well enough that I can start offering them on the website. And then from there, Alan's going to have to send me some Parkoblatta Desserti when he produces some of them. And, hopefully rounding out the rest of the Parkoblatta by the end of this summer. I used to be a big Parkoblatta nut, but the diapause that some of them, some lines have and some localities have and some don't have, et cetera, it's just kind of a pain to deal with. And I really have to make a concerted effort to do that. The ideal scenario with species or strains or localities that need diapause is to get them get a huge number of them going into one of these style enclosures by October, and then just take that and throw it in the cold room in the basement and forget about it for the winter. And then around late February, pull it out of there and let them enumerate again. Mimic the natural cycle for some of these. So, and some, like I said before, some of them, it can be kind of tricky seeing whether or not it's poor husbandry or if it's some sort of intrinsic diapause requirement that needs to be taken care of, like with the zebra, where it's like, oh, no diapause needed. It just wasn't keeping them moist enough, apparently. So I know there are more roaches. I know I'm forgetting some of them. Lanxobladderudis are not ready yet. They're doing okay in the new setup, and I've had some adults emerge that look very healthy. I had some losses when I moved them into the new setup, but it seems I have adults of both sexes. And I put so much space and so much stuff in there that I can't possibly find or see them all. So I'm just gonna keep feeding them, watering them, taking care of them, and just keep my fingers crossed that one day I'll look in there and they'll be babies, and then maybe a year and a half from now they'll infest the container, and that would be wonderful. We are past the 2-hour mark, and I love this because we've gone over a lot today, as we have been doing and usually seem to do. So I'm going to answer these last two things, and I think probably call it a night from there. This is a wonderful stream. You had amazing viewership throughout the whole stream, and I'm very thankful for that, and I hope it continues to go up as time goes on. And I will be doing some special streams in the near future when I figure out how to do them. I might invite Kim Wisman on to talk about his experience as a true many decades old veteran of the herpetological and invertebrate culture communities and whatnot, as well as a stream where I go through and show off some of these Aranavega that I'm very proud of. But that's pending on the technology and whatnot to be used. So some eggs ask, how do you keep your animals alive when you go on road trips? A lot of this stuff can just be put on cruise control. So I may have somebody who comes over and waters. I might flip off all the heat, overfeed a little bit. For the most part, a lot of things can go many weeks without any sort of husbandry if they've had a good momentum of care. It's if you leave a colony that's sort of in decline, that you can have issues with it, if you leave for some period of time. So you usually have somebody to water, like the herps and whatnot, and take care of the animals, like the rabbits and the poultry in the yard, on a daily basis, because that's what's needed. But with a lot of the bugs, I can either flip off everything and go away and come back and pick it up, and the ball will start rolling again. Most of the time, or I'll have somebody just do a little bit of maintenance, like spray every couple of days or something like that, because most of my stuff may only get maintenance every 10 to 20 days depending on my schedule and a bunch of other stuff. So it's not like if I go on a trip, it's probably feels very very standard for a lot of the invertebrate cultures, at least. And Hazy asked, do you have any Blatella sinai care tips? They've been on my wish list, but I read that they fly a lot. Oh boy, do they fly a lot. Probably the flyiest roach, hands down, Blatella sinai. In fact, so much so that I would say if you aren't specifically infatuated with Blatella sinai, it's probably easier for you to keep German roaches because they do not fly. And other than that, the care is pretty much the same. They just like very, very dry, well-ventilated conditions with just a touch of moisture towards the back of the enclosure, or even just completely dry but with a little water source like a wick waterer, or completely dry with just a light spray daily so that they can drink. And yes, the Sinai is the one that does look like a German cockroach. So yeah, but they do fly. They do fly a lot. It's what has made me hesitant about putting them in one of these smaller enclosures, because at least in the 5.5 gallon that they're in right now, when I open up, there's a lot of headspace, so they don't all just take off straight into the air column. They'll be jumping on the walls or on the decor or whatnot. Versus in one of these containers, I'm sure if I open it up, I would probably lose at least one every time I open it up. unless I was fat. The other thing, though, is like I said, basically just need like a light. They're very easy roaches to take care of. You can't just throw like a handful of dog food or something in there and forget about them forever and not have a big crash at some point. So they're not easy roaches in the sense that you can't set them up and have no qualms with the colony like you would with like dubias or discoids, or I'm trying to think of what other roaches I have listed as easy things that are, or lobster roaches where you pretty much can't do anything to kill them. Um, so yeah, they require a little bit more tact to your husbandry approach. But if I really had to, I could just throw them in one of those tanks with a little watering port on it, and just make sure I watered once a day. Just a squirt that went to the back corner to keep one corner moist, and that they could drink it off the walls and whatnot. And then just have the dry food up near the front of the enclosure where it won't get infected with grain mites or anything like that. So, with that being said, I can hear Victor moaning and groaning, so he probably wants some attention or to go out. So I think this is a good place for me to call the stream. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. This was a wonderful live stream. Stay posted on the website for new stuff. We have that big roach dump coming pretty soon, and the trickle of other stuff is just going to keep going. I have all kinds of crickets and beetles and miscellaneous other things that desperately need to be added to the website, and isopods too. So I hope everybody had a good time, and I'll see some of you, or maybe all of you guys, next week. So take care, and may your cultures be ever bountiful.